to 2023, and this is the first live show of this new year. So I hope you all had a great Christmas and a great new year, or you had whichever one you had, and you're okay about it, whatever happened. It's good to have you all back, and we've got a cracking guest to start the year with, Tracey Woodward, who has spent many years in health, wellness and beauty industries and sort of risen to the top. But she's going to be sharing her life story with us a bit, and also some of the work that she does and what motivates her and drives her. So I'll be back with Tracey in just 1 second. Really happy to have you on. I'm just going to say I might hack away, people. So because I've got a cold. I'm coming out of it, but got the dreaded man flu. So I'm sort of soldiering on through like the true hero that I am to get through this. But if I start hacking away, I'll try and put my mic on silent because it's an unpleasant sound, but I might miss it. So apologies for that in advance. It is live, so it'd be lovely to hear from people. If you want to jump in, you can WhatsApp me on +44 7506 319 745, or drop a message in one of the platforms we're on, which at the moment is Facebook Live and my YouTube channel. James will be surfing that. And if he sees anything, he'll sort of send it over to me. That's about it. Without further ado, hello, Tracey. Welcome to the Wellbeing Show. How are you doing?
I'm really well, thank you, Noel. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Oh, it's great. I'm sort of really happy that you're here. And you're just sort of back from Germany, and then tomorrow you're off to Geneva. So thank you for squeezing us in.
Yeah. 20 minutes through the door.
Are you really? Literally?
Yeah. But I actually, when you pack and you think, and then you're sitting in the taxi and you think, where are the front door keys?
Yeah.
What have I done with the front door keys? So I thought, what if I haven't got them? What if I've left them in the safe? So I called a friend and said, can I pick up the spare keys? And then and then pick the keys up and then rushed in, dropped all the bags. There's rubbish everywhere, bags, cases. But I'm here. I'm relieved to be here.
It's the joy
James calmed me down.
Yeah, it's the joy of these Zoom meetings. We don't know about the chaos of people's lives, so we managed to reduce it to this.
We just see that bit.
Thing.
Yeah.
There's dead bodies and all sorts of things all over the place. James is good at calming people down, I find.
He's really good.
Yeah. Panics himself. I don't know if he's got a girlfriend yet. That's his usual panic, is that he's going to die alone, a skeleton sort of fossilizing away.
I cannot believe that. He's way too charming and kind.
He's way too charming. He's also far too young to be having those catastrophic thoughts. He's only 12 or something. Do you know what I mean?
But dating's hard today. Yeah. It's really hard. I'm going to be doing with a girlfriend a dating podcast. Yeah, we're going into the studio to record 13 episodes. She's in her late 30s, and of course I was 57 on Friday. Yeah. And the challenges are similar but also different, because when you get to my age, then you pick off certain qualities that you're looking for. The pool is very small at the end of it. So yeah, so not that I'm choosy, it's just that I want someone that's aligned with what I like to do.
Yeah, quite. I mean, I've got a date on Saturday as well, so I'm back in the game.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, you've got to do it, haven't you?
You've got to get
on with it.
Yeah.
These dating apps, though, I find are a bit strange, and
yeah. I call them. I think that too many people orbit around the apps. They're in this. They always think that there's something better. And I call them data wars. Like all they want to do is be on the app and choose and talk.
I agree with you. I mean, I've used them years before, and I met my current ex, my boy's mum. We met. I shouldn't say this. She'll give me a kicking for saying this, but there you go. Too late. It's out there now. Maybe I could edit it out. have to. Anyway, there was a time when I was doing it and I met somebody on it. They seem to have changed a lot since, in terms of that thing that you're saying, which is that being on the app seems more important than actually meeting somebody and having a relationship.
Yeah. It's about validation. It's so easy to get validation by being on an app, by being liked. And it seems to be that in some cases that's enough for people, or they think, I need more likes, I need more likes. So I'll stay for the likes rather than
people are collecting profiles that have liked them, but not doing anything with them. Because I limit the number of profiles to 2 or 3 because I can't have conversations with more than that in terms of people.
Well, since 2019, I've spoken to 1,016 men.
Have
been
you?
on 99 dates, kissed 5 and slept with 3.
That's not bad. That's not bad.
I'm a numbers girl.
Yeah, that's not bad. So
if I could put it into a P&L, I would.
Well, good for you. Good luck to you. Well done for you. So Tracey, you started in the beauty industry, I think, originally.
I did. Yes, I did. In the early 80s. So I came from quite an underprivileged background, a very unique upbringing, and didn't learn to read and write until I was 15. But I used to be out with my mum often, and I used to not only watch, Dynasty and Dallas and all of those great American soaps, and think, oh, look at those women. Look at Alexis Colby with the hair and the shoes and the perfume. And the only people that really resembled those women that I knew and observed were beauty consultants. So I thought, I want to be one of them. That's the closest I'm going to get to being, Crystal Carrington. And so I said to my mum's friend who helped me and looked after me a lot growing up, there's a Estee Lauder advertising roles. Actually, it was Clinique who was part of the Estee Lauder Corporation advertising roles, and so she said, "Come on, let's go." And I said, "But it's at the Westbury Hotel, just off of Bond Street." And she said, "No, I'll take you." And I went in a dress that I'd loaned, and also a pair of her shoes. She's a size 3 and I'm a size 6. Thank God they were slingbacks, but I squeezed my feet into these shoes and got the job. And thankfully, that was the start of my career. And I've had some amazing mentors and support along the way. I'm not an academic. I'm completely self-taught. Every time I've taken a role, I've been completely out of my depth, but I've never said no. And I thought, I'll learn and I'll admit that I don't understand, and I'll find people to teach me and help me. And I've found the most amazing mentors, and I've done everything from counter girl to CEO in the beauty industry.
Which is interesting, because I think it's a very interesting and very different approach to, say, some of the public figures that are going around at the moment. I'm thinking particularly of the guy who's lied his way into Congress at the moment. And you didn't lie, but you were honest about, well, I don't know this, but I'm willing to learn. And you had an attitude of openness, humility. I'm intrigued. Do you mind talking about why you didn't know how to read and write? What was going on?
Yeah. So the first time my mum ever had sex, she found herself pregnant. She didn't discover she was pregnant until she was 20 weeks pregnant. She was 18.
Story.
From the 60s, right? So she was 26 weeks when she started to hemorrhage. And I was born at 26 weeks, weighing 1 pound 13 ounces, and I was put in an incubator and told that, the family were told that I probably wouldn't survive, and if I did, I would be a vegetable. That's the words that they used in those days. And so my mum just kind of carried on living her life, and my grandma stepped in, and then my grandma was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and 3.5 years on, actually 4, died. And the day after my grandma's funeral, my granddad, Alfred Howes, evicted us from the family home to move in his girlfriend, who was younger than my mum. And my mum she didn't really have a relationship with me. I mean, I was her daughter and she was my mum, and she did her very best, but she was totally dependent on her family for financial support and security. And just really kind of, met some wonderful people, but also got in with some really, really, really bad people. So my childhood was either looking after my brother or actually going shoplifting with my mum. So my mum was a professional shoplifter and did it for a living. And I'm not talking about a leg of lamb or a couple of steaks. This was serious, cashmere sweaters, fur coats, duvets, bed linen, beautiful lingerie, everything that women wanted. She used to steal for Cynthia Payne and the ladies of the night that worked with Cynthia. So all high quality garments, and a lot of the times I would put on. I was quite tall as a younger person. I'm 5'7" now, but I was reasonably good height. And she'd say things like, if we get caught, I'm going to prison and you're going to care, so we better, not get caught. But there were lots of things that she taught me about life, even though my life wasn't abnormal to me until I got older and observed other people's lives. And actually, when you're friends with criminals and outliers, because they are in a certain way, you live in that world and no different. And actually, I got a job in a chemist because I was subjected to quite a bit of violence growing up with some of my mum's boyfriends. And I just wanted to get away. I just wanted to get away from that life. And so as soon as I was 16, I rang the council every single day. But prior to that, I got a job in a chemist, and I said, the girls that take the prescriptions earn 50 pence a week more. I'm unpacking boxes and cleaning and doing all those things. How do I get to do that? And he said, Tracey, you have to learn to read and write. You can't read and write. But I'm really surprised because, you talk to people, you're funny, you've got all of the good qualities and presence. But of course, that all came from the attitude from stealing, right? Because you had to be cocky I don't want to say cocky and aggressive, but you had to have a bit of something about you, so that you didn't draw attention. So you had to look like you belonged.
Absolutely.
You had to look like you belonged in those places. And so that was I guess the upbringing.
Didn't go to school, or you did go to school?
I didn't go to school. And actually, one of the things that my mum loved to do is every time she met a new man, she would change our surname and open a new bank account. Most of the places that we lived in were either on loan for friends. I mean, not squats, because squats makes them sound horrible, but places where people say, you can live here for 6 months or 3 months, or we're doing this. Or she'd buy a rent book. She'd always, keep us off the street, but it was really, really tough.
It's interesting. The thing about squatting is I used to squat, and it's sort of these days it's sort of as a bad and illegal. It definitely wasn't. It was just a housing option at one point, particularly in London. It was a very reasonable
London. In Camden, we squatted in some of the nicer areas.
Absolutely. I mean, I sort of quite a significant number of my friends then went on to get their permanent accommodation from squats and stuff like that. And I live in Hackney. There's a number of places that started off as squats and have become live work and little hubs of activity and business and stuff like that. But it's sort of the political climate change. But actually, it was just part of the landscape, I seem to remember.
It was in the 70s for sure, 60s and 70s.
And also in the 60s and 70s, I would say this sort of criminality was also part of the landscape. I mean, and it's something I remember from my childhood. It's not something I did professionally, but it was normal. It was part of life. It was an accepted part of, I mean, it's not normal for as in everybody was doing it, but it was certainly not it's not as, in a sense,
seedy as people thought.
Or
seedy.
It was criminalized, to be honest. It was sort of understood to be just part of the framework. And
It was people trying to get out of where they were, using whatever means they possibly could. And so, I mean, it's just that obviously mine was, there were serious criminals. They were bank robbers and dealers and did all sorts of crazy things. But it was, it never seemed, there was parties in our house Thursdays, Fridays and Saturday nights. My mum would go on 3 and 4 day benders. She loved to dance. That's where I got my love of music. Her whole life was lived through music. I always knew what emotional state she was in by the music that she played on a Sunday morning, whether it was Timmy Euro or, Dionne Warwick or Mary Wells, if it was, Stevie Wonder, if it was uplifted or it was sad. And and I think that she had her heart broken many, many times, and she just was a victim of circumstance and came from a very middle class family and was just abandoned.
Yeah.
And so, people always go, "Oh, well done, well done you." But I think, well done my mum too. It wasn't easy, and she always managed to put on a brave face. She had so much. She had a big love for life, but this glamorous, sophisticated woman that could light up a room, and she had such presence. I used to watch her put her makeup on, and she used to say to me, "Oh, don't worry, Tracy, you'll get better looking as you get older." Because I was this ugly duckling because I was premature, I was skinny, I was gaunt, I was always sick. So, but yeah.
Well, there was a lot.
She tried to drown me once. That was quite funny. She used to hate washing my hair because it was long and thick at that point. And so she one day we were supposed to be going out somewhere to do something, and she held me under the water and tried to drown me. And after that, she said, I can never wash your hair again. I'm sorry, but I can never wash your hair again. And one week she sent me to the hairdressers, and I said to the hairdresser, "My mum says I could have a Rod Stewart haircut whilst I'm here." And she said, "What?" She said I could have a Rod Stewart haircut. So I came back from the hairdressers where I had this long blonde hair with this spiky Rod haircut, like a mullet almost. And she went absolutely ballistic. What she didn't call me.
But I mean, it sounds like there was quite a lot on responsibility on your shoulders from a young age.
Yeah, a lot.
You're not discussing it in either a sort of disassociated way, like you've been traumatized by, or a bitter way, or you seem quite thoughtful about it, and even compassionate and kind.
Yeah, I feel compassionate about it. I've never had therapy, but when I got to about 35, I was absolutely terrified that people would know, my upbringing, that I couldn't learn, that I hadn't learned to read and write, and I wasn't academic, and I just thought, I shouldn't be doing this job. I don't have an MBA, and I didn't go to university or even school. And so that's when I decided to work with children's charities and go out and speak to kids that had similar upbringings and the challenges with life in the same way that I did. But I was never traumatized from it. I used to say to myself that it's got nothing to do with me. That was one of the things that I said to myself kind of when I understood some of the violence and the abuse that I'd been subjected to. I mean, I had a lot of common sense. I used to when we lived in North London, my bedroom had an old-fashioned door handle, Victorian door handle, and I found a little screwdriver and I unscrewed the screws and I used to pull the handle through so that when I went to bed I could sleep. We had always had strangers in our house, but I would keep myself safe. I knew that I couldn't get out if you have to twiddle it around quite a bit to open it, but no one could get in either because I've got quite a lot of scars on my face where I've been subjected to violence and bruises. But I've also seen my mum, beaten so badly that she's had 2 black eyes and not able to move. So I suppose there was always compassion for each other.
Right.
And it didn't make me love her.
Never sort of saw her as the point of, I'm going to blame this person. They didn't look after me properly. That was never an experience you had. No. Yeah. No. Interesting.
Yeah. I was never angry. I waited a long time. When she was diagnosed with terminal cancer, I said, what is it you want me? What can I do for you? Do you want me to do anything for you? And follow up on anything? Have someone beaten up? Is there anything that you want me to do? And she said no. And I said, well, is there anything that you want to say? And she said, yeah, there is. And there was just her and I in the hospital, and she said, I regret not being the mother to you that you deserve.
Right.
And I was 47 at the time, and I said, right, I've waited a long time to hear that, and I'm very grateful. And I left.
So you got your apology.
Ward. Yeah, I left the ward and I had to put my sunglasses on. And my mum always used to say to me, because my mum would lash out at me. She was a violent, when things weren't right, I would get a real belting, and then she wouldn't be sorry afterwards, but she would be quiet. And she always used to say to me, don't cry. You mustn't cry. You mustn't cry in front of anybody that, that this, that does anything to you, you do not cry. And that was part of her way of dealing with things. And so I didn't cry much as a child, which is probably why I'm quite resilient. And I used to dance a lot, dance it off. But as I left that ward, I could not stop the tears leaving my eyes, and they were in my ears all the way to my car. I paid to get out the car park, and then I just sat in my car and cried. Sure. That the car park had doubled in price by the time I went to leave. I couldn't, the block, I had to go and pay again. And I'd waited a long time for it, but but she was very special to me, and there isn't a day go by when I don't wish that I could call her. I used to call her every morning at 7:30. Right. Yeah.
How long has she been dead now?
So she's been dead for 8 years, since 2013.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I guess she saw you. She saw you begin to thrive and be successful. And I imagine she was just over the moon seeing that.
Yeah. She looked after my children. I paid her to stay at home and look after both my children. And she was an amazing grandmother. She was so great. She was so great for both of my kids. And they miss her probably more than I do, because she was everything to them. I mean, I think that's a powerful thing, to have that opportunity.
It's an interesting thing, I think. It's very easy for people to get judgmental about parental deficits and stuff like that, and whatever you want to call it. But I think, my experience, both personally and professionally, is that there's a huge difference between a parent whose deficits are, they're doing the best they can, and it just happens to be the circumstances or inherited stuff or whatever it is. But actually, they genuinely are doing, and somebody is just a nasty piece of work. She wasn't a nasty piece of work, was she? She was, a product of her circumstances and her times, and she did the best she could. She did what she thought was right.
Yeah. And I have no doubt in that era, when life was changing so much for women, there were lots of women in the same situation as her. Maybe not shoplifting, maybe not a hustler. My mum was a hustler. She was a hedonist hustler. She loved sex. She loved partying. She loved alcohol. She loved drugs. She loved looking fantastic. She was a complete hedonist. But I'm sure that there was, millions of women fighting that same fight at that point, just free to do things. And not even completely free at that point.
And also, I think also people don't know, maybe don't understand how acceptable it was to be violent towards women. It still is in many quarters acceptable, but it's being challenged. But in those days, it was absolutely normal. Nobody would think, nobody would bat an eyelid. I mean, there's the famous sort of interview with Sean Connery, isn't there, where he just talks about, and just slap her across the face, and people have pulled that interview up and said what a terrible person he was. And I don't know if he was, I've never met the guy, but that was normal. Those statements were pretty normal in those days, and that behavior was pretty normal. And being a woman in those times was and certainly trying to make your way in the world as a woman, trying to earn a living, was virtually impossible without some sort of leg up. For sure. And again, the stigma about single parenting and all of that sort of stuff was huge. I mean, the sorts of and what's interesting,
outcasts. They were outcasts with certain groups.
Well,
sure.
To be honest, I worked in a number of hospital closures, and one of them was a learning disability hospital up in Scotland, and it was during the period of time when we were closing these large institutions down, and it was quite common. A number of the women there were women, they didn't have a learning disability, they didn't have any mental health problems, but they'd been incarcerated because they were single mums. And I had this really interesting experience, which is described in the literature, which I wasn't quite sure was real, because these women had been in these hospitals so long, and I was working with people in their 60s, the whole life in a hospital, and they didn't have a learning disability, but they'd taken on the persona of somebody as a learning disability, and then they would switch when they thought they weren't being looked at, and you could see, I mean, the whole body shape would change, the tone of voice would change, the cognitive function. And I did it once in a session, I pretended to be asleep just to see, And this woman did it. She went from having a learning disability and it disappeared. It was gone. And she was organising the other patients and making sure they're okay. And she'd clearly been one of those women that were incarcerated just for...
And how hard to live half of your life like that. I mean, or, 3/4 of it. I mean, just horrific.
She would have been, what, I suppose, 18 or 19 when she was incarcerated. And she would have fought it.
Not even knowing yourself. As I said, I'm, in my 50s now. And I've only just started to really discover myself. It doesn't happen until you're in your 40s. That's why we shouldn't get married until later in life.
But your life went slightly different pathway to your mum's.
Yeah.
So you managed to come out of that cycle of abuse and use of alcohol and drugs and So,
and my brother didn't, and sadly my brother died 7 years ago. We believe he was murdered, but we couldn't actually prove it. He was found completely naked, and I had to switch off his life support machine and wait with him, and that was absolutely horrific. And he chose a similar path to my mum. It's just that he didn't have maybe the strength that she had, and got into hard drugs and alcohol, and just it was very, very sad to watch. And I tried on numerous occasions to support and save him, but if people don't want to save themselves, it's so hard. It's such a hard thing to do. But
I think we should reinforce that, because in case people are listening, and I it's very common to me that family members feel very guilty about somebody if they have an addiction issue, and literally there's nothing you can do unless they choose to do something
to be with you, to do something about it, and that's the hardest thing. And I truly believe that he didn't want to. It took me a lot of efforts. I had him to live with me several times, and got him jobs, let me down. And the last time happened when I went to his house, and it was Christmas Eve, and I took food and gave him some money, and he said, can you take me to the shop that's open all day? And actually I drove him to this dealer, and I said to him, I can't believe that you've done that to me. I'm here, I'm dressed up, I don't know these people, you've just pulled up in my car outside this place. And I said, that's it. And we didn't speak for some time after that.
It's hard work. I've got a finger in that one, in the sense of I'm on the board of a charity called Drug Fam, which deals with gives support to family members and friends of people who've got substance misuse problems. So if people are listening to this being triggered, give them a call. They will help you out. Just Google Drug Fam. It's really, really hard work to break that cycle of ineffective rescuing and helping.
It's true, and it's hard for both of you. It's hard for both of you. I would definitely say seek help.
And seek help from peers. And I think that's the nice thing about Drug Fam. It's other people going through, because I think there's a lot of shame around these things, and I'm really excited that you're talking about them, because the more we talk about these things, the more we reduce the shame and stigma, and people can go, blimey, it's not just me.
It's so true. I mean, I think that shame is probably one of the most harmful emotional states, because it just, as soon as you, and actually as soon as I joined Action for Children, the Prince's Trust, and Beanstalk Charity, and I started talking about my life and where I came from and how it had gone the way it had gone, I just felt this sense of relief. It was just like, I kind of, took 10 years off of my life, because it's like you're carrying a heavy block, and everybody has shit, right? Everybody has things go wrong, and some days are way worse than others. But you must never let shame hold you back from anything, because it just steals your life. It just steals your life away.
Shame, it's an interesting emotion. It does have some healthy applications, but it's there to stop us from murdering, torturing, and abusing each other. That's what it's there for, right?
But we shouldn't be doing it to ourselves.
That's right, but it's for nothing else other than these horrific antisocial things. And outside of that, it's inappropriate to have. It really is.
So I say shake off the shame.
Yes, I totally agree with you. I'm lapsed Catholic, so sort of a lot of shame and guilt.
Yeah. There's a lot of shaming there. I always say, when you see dogs, right? When you see dogs and they've been told off, as soon as you see a dog and it's been told off, or it's been stroked by someone it doesn't like, it kind of goes like that, and then it shakes it off. And it's a good shake, and then it's all right.
It's really interesting, actually, that whole shaking fascia, release of shame and trauma. Peter Levine is a really interesting trauma therapist. He wrote a book called Awake the Tiger, which is all about that. And animals have fur. What they do when they're really upset and stressed out by something, they go like that. And then it goes. You can do it now to yourself, and you can really feel it, sort of letting it go. And it's a technique that
That's what Taylor Swift says. You've got to shake it off.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's a really good thing to sort of let it go. Most people don't know about fascia, which is this sort of thing that holds our muscles in place just underneath our skin.
All our neurons there, inflammation sits there. Yeah. The more you add to it, the more with high your cortisol, your adrenaline, you trigger the inflammation.
Let's talk about that a bit, because that's been an area of interest for you, hasn't it? So looking at these, because you've worked a lot with yourself. You say not in therapy, which is cool, but in other ways, thought very carefully about your health and well-being, haven't you? Particularly around these issues of stress, inflammation, food, self-worth, etc. So do you mind just sort of giving me a little bit of your story around that and sort of how you've got
so when I was
a fast, aren't you?
Yeah. I'm just back from a 15-day fast in a clinic called Booking Awahami in Germany, which I've been going to for the last 7 years. But when I was in my mid-40s,
I know a number of people have been to that one.
Yeah, it's brilliant. So 70 years old, the oldest, they write white papers, science-based.
They're really safe.
Brilliant place to be.
I've had a lot of clients who've gone to that one.
Yeah. People say to me, oh, you're off to your happy place. And I actually thought about it more and more. And it's not that it's my happy place, it's that it's my safe place. It's the place where I just hand over my whole being to them. And they are kind and they nurture and they look after me. And I don't really have to think about anything, because by nature, I like to give and I like to do. And eventually, you kind of run out of steam. But
so tell me the distinction you're making, because I think it's a really important distinction between happy and safe. Why do you make that distinction?
Yeah, because for me, I've always been a doer. So I've kind of, maybe, men and women do this, but you put yourself last. So especially if you're a CEO and you're running a company, you're running an organization, everybody's welfare, you have a duty of care to the company financially and to the people. If you're a mum, you have a duty of care to your children and to your partner. And I just found that I was kind of going down a road similar to my mum, that I was not really looking after myself. I wasn't sleeping well, I wasn't managing stress. I was diagnosed with thyroid issues. I had type 2 diabetes, borderline type 1 diabetes, really, really unwell. And actually it was my menopause doctor, because I was diagnosed with the menopause at 35, that discovered that I had type 2 diabetes and borderline type 1. He's like, you're going to have a stroke any minute now. And then, of course, I watched my mum die. And that made me realize that, that was my path, unless I chose to change my ways. And so I recruited an amazing public health nutritionist, a lady called Yvonne Wake, who came to our house. She ordered our cupboards. She looked after, our eating patterns. I joined fitness, got myself into the body clinic, and then just started to look at, I read a book called Inflammation Nation, which was like reading a textbook to me, but it kind of showed me the impact of inflammation on every preventative condition. And so the first thing that I did is I started to work on my gut. So this is almost 10 years ago. So, it took a particular diet.
Well, before it was popularized.
Yeah. But
it certainly was a long time ago. Yeah.
Yeah, and no, it just felt right to me. It felt like, again, intuitively, that my problems were in my stomach, that were in my gut. It wasn't that I had IBS, but it just felt every time I ate something, I just felt really unwell, which was obviously the diabetes and the liver. And I just started reading and doing, and then, obviously fitness, walking, and I reversed the type 2, reversed the, the borderline type 1, then reversed the 2, and then and started reading about fasting, and then moved into that fasting. And I thought, well, where is the best place to go to fast? And that's how I discovered Booking. So I kind of went from, going to one of Yvonne's retreats where it was nice and easy, calorie controlled, nice female environment. Everybody was there to lose a few pounds, and I was there to try and reverse something, because my doctors wanted to put me on all of the medication that they put people on, and I was like, I'm not going there. I watched my mum. When my mum was diagnosed with terminal cancer, she was taking 26 different tablets a day.
Yeah.
And and they instantly said, well, let's not bother with any of that anymore. And I just thought, I'm not even taking a statin. I mean, people do what they have to do, but I thought, I'm not even doing that. And going on this process of learning about gut health and well-being and the importance of sleep. And then I'd become the CEO of Aromatherapy Associates, and I brought in a panel of well-being experts, because I believe that aromatherapy will make you feel better through the power of essential oils. But what about teaching people how to think smarter about well-being? Yeah. And then I found myself at the Global Wellness Summit speaking in America about sleep and my journey. And it just seemed to roll on, and still today I talk about it, because I decided that my health was something that I had to learn about. And I think that actually my upbringing gave me the confidence to go out and ask people for help, rather than sit in front of a doctor and say, just write me a prescription.
Yeah, because you came into the professional world sort of realistic, like, I don't really know anything, I'm going to learn it. And you came into this with a similar type of attitude.
Yeah, exactly the same attitude.
Yeah.
And I truly believe that the reason why people fail to get themselves back into shape is because they don't realize how long it takes. It's taken me a decade.
Yeah.
And if you see pictures of me at 47 and you see pictures of me at 57, you think they're the wrong way around. There's no way that is her today, and that was her 10 years ago.
I think length of time as well is really important. Like, I'm on year 2 of my health recovery from the pandemic. So the first year of it started last year, and it was about physical activity. This year is more about food intake, and so because I knew food intake was going to be more complicated for me. I grew up you will know this, I grew up on sugar sandwiches as a food source. That's what we considered food when I was a child. With bread and butter with sugar on it.
Exactly the same.
So you know exactly what I'm talking about there. So there's always been an interesting relationship to that particular drug, which is called processed sugar, which of course is a drug, and we know that it's a drug. And so, but I'm going to come back to safety versus happiness, because I really think it's really interesting. Partly because I'm with you 100%. I think it's more about safety than anything else. If we can find safety, we can do everything else.
And that's how I feel when
I think it's a problem. People chase feelings like happiness. It's actually that's going to fail every single time. It's like your brother was doing that, right? He was that's what he was chasing, and that's what your mum was chasing, and it never worked.
Escapism. It doesn't work. And safety comes from and if I attach it to booking out, I arrive, I'm weighed, my blood pressure's taken, my bloods are taken. They tell me, where I'm at. They tell me what's going to happen in the next couple of weeks, what I can do, what I can't do, what do I want to do? I'm asked, and that's it. And then everything just appears. Whereas, we create happiness, right? We think, oh, we'll buy that thing, or we'll do that stuff, or we'll do this. And it's all down to us. And we never, we often don't meet our own expectations. Whereas when you go into an environment and they say, okay, you can stay up until 1 o'clock in the morning, but we recommend that you get 8 to 10 hours sleep whilst you're here, because you're consuming no calories, and so you are going to feel tired. So So you're not taught how to think, but you're because they've done this thousands, millions of times probably in the years, and they've written white papers and studies, they know how the body is going to react. They don't know necessarily how you're going to react emotionally, but they know how the body's going to react. And that gives you some confidence.
You have to be thoughtful about that, because there's going to be quite significant emotional journeys involved in doing something like that. But we were talking before the show, before people think, this is weird, why are they talking about this? It's a perfectly natural state for humans to go from feast to famine. That's literally what we're genetically programmed to do anyway. We think historically we were hunter-gatherers, and carbohydrates were in short supply, and we would feast on them when we found them. So they'd find that bee's nest, and the tribe or the clan would sit there until they'd eaten all the honey, etc., and then they'd move on. So there's nothing unusual about this. It's actually resetting a natural pattern in some ways.
It is. And for me, it feels good to do it in the winter, because it's that time of year when I assume that's how it was, but it just feels right. Some people like to do it in spring, new beginnings. Some people like to do it in the summer.
What took you to fasting, though? What was the thing in your research?
Because I knew that fasting was that had the most impact on reducing visceral fat, and I knew that visceral fat was the visible sign that inflammation and preventative illnesses like cardiovascular disease, cancer, would get the diabetes would get the better of you. So if you can reduce your visceral fat, again, common sense approach, right? I used to say to my mum, I've got plenty of common sense, I'll be all right. And she used to say, but let me tell you, common sense is not that common.
Yes, that's absolutely true. So let's just, so people understand what visceral fat means. It means around your belly. Everything
around your belly, everything, kind of, I'm a big, I'm tall, I'm 5'7", I'm the D cup, so you couldn't see the difference between my breast and my belly. It was all just one. Okay. And so I thought, it's obvious this is the bit that's got to go, because that's the bit that makes us sick. So I started
tell us
with
why
weights.
That, I know, but tell the people listening, why is visceral fat so bad?
Because actually it means that the it's squashing your organs, it's impacting your organs, it's impacting your cortisol and your adrenaline, because it's always high. It means that your liver can't get rid of this, it can't process it, so it's putting everything at risk. It's making everything dysfunctional, not skipping a beat, but not working as well as it should. So until it's a bit like moving nine members of family to sleep in one room. It gets pretty uncomfortable in there.
It does.
It's so bad for your health, and you feel it in your lungs, you feel it in your energy. Everything that you try to do, you can't walk up hills. And it triggers.
And that's literally what's happening for me this year. That's what I've set the goals around, is reducing that. And there's another connection, which I'm going to do is from a psychological perspective as well, which is visceral fat builds up in response often to cortisol levels. Yeah. And it is often a response to stress and trauma, to be honest. Yeah. And so it's one of the reasons why, and thinking psychologically about it, why when people want to reduce that, if they're not thinking about, and this is why I think safe space is so important in this conversation. Yeah. Because safe space is the core of all trauma reduction work.
Yeah.
So if you go and do any form of psychological therapies around dealing with trauma, like EMDR, which is in the news, or there's lots of them. There's Rewind, CBT, there's a whole bunch of them. There's kinetic-based ones, there's body-based ones. So there's a whole bunch of stuff. But every single one of them will start with this idea of creating a safe space, because when we have a safe space, our stress hormones reduce, and in particular, the cortisol reduces.
Yeah, and then we can sleep, and then our body can go into recovery, and it can start processing. But if you go to bed every night on a full stomach, and you're highly stressed, your cortisol, your adrenaline is never going to come down. Your gut health is never going to recover. The idea. I mean, it's only just recently that they discovered that grumbling that we feel, that the world of consumerism has told us that every time we hear a grumble, we need to eat something, is actually our gut biome rebalancing and pushing
Yes.
it through. You know, for years everyone thought, oh well, if your tummy grumbled, it's because you needed something to eat. Actually, if you've got a grumbling tummy, you're on your way to recovery. It's a good thing.
Just leave it alone. That's right. And it's also what I'm struck by in this whole conversation about creating safety and the way you create safety is I'm struck by that little anecdote you told us about your bedroom as a child and how you made it a safe place. And even at that age, you were knowing, somehow you knew, I've got to make this safe. My bedroom has to be safe. I have to be able to sleep. Maybe you didn't formulate it consciously.
No,
but you learned to do it. You learned to sort of make yourself safe. And you learned that from somewhere. I guess you learned it from your mum, even though she didn't make herself safe, sadly.
Yeah.
She had to put herself at risk to survive in some ways, is how I understand it. But you were learning from an early age. And I would, again, sort of suggest to people that, because I think the pursuit of happiness is not a bad thing. It's just it becomes more medication than it does problem solving. You know, and again, I don't have any issues around people going on diets, etc. I mean, I work with people with eating disorders, etc. And so the word diets are problematic psychologically, etc. But outside of that, I think often people fail around their health goals because they don't understand that at the core of it has to be this concept of psychological safety.
Definitely. But still today, no, I cannot not have food in my cupboards. I cannot not. I mean, I've got an Ocado delivery coming tonight at 10 o'clock because I cannot go to my fridge and it be completely empty. Because that's how it was growing up. So I have to be able to see things that I can make a meal. And it's crazy. Even if I have to end up throwing, 20% of it away, I will do that because that gives me the security.
Let me tell you something, because I really identify with that. And I grew up in a family of 5 kids and not enough money, and violence and alcoholism and all sorts of things like that. You and I know, sort of that's the story. But food was at times in short supply in the family, even though my mum worked very hard to make sure there was enough. There wasn't enough. That was it. Then we would get hungry. And we would steal each other's food. And the way you had food in my family as a kid was that you, like in a Friday evening when you had fish and chips, because that's when you had it, you would make all your chip butties and guard them and eat them as quick as possible so that somebody else didn't steal them from you, right? You know that. All of that stuff.
Yeah. I just used to get the tips. I always used to be envious of my friends because they could have fish and chips and I could only afford the chips.
That's right, yeah. But it was that gobbling it as quickly as possible so that one of your siblings or somebody didn't steal it from me because it was in... And it took me until I was in my 30s to stop gobbling my food. To sort of... Because I had to really consciously say to myself, look, there's enough. Somebody isn't going to steal it from you unless one of my siblings do turn up, and sometimes they still do steal from each other. But that was, I mean, that stuff is really ingrained, isn't it?
Yeah. It's there. And it stays with you forever. You just learn to manage it better. And it's okay. It's okay to know that it's still there and it's still part of you, because that's what keeps your feet firmly on the ground. But it's I am saddened when I see that it gets the better of some people.
Well, look, I mean, I think the point I'm making is this, and it comes back to this idea that, like, for you, the childhood you had was perfectly normal till you understood it wasn't. And then when you understood it wasn't, you could change the way you do things rather than. And I think the problem comes when people don't realise where the problem is. And the problem is that they've normalised unhealthy habits. And sort of learning that these unhealthy habits, because it's not healthy to just gobble your food down as quickly as possible because you're afraid somebody's stealing from you.
But that's the one thing. That's the one thing I say about health. You are doing yourself a complete disservice when it comes to your lifespan. To when you're doing something you know is wrong, it's a disservice. So now I have the information. I choose to make better choices, and I choose to go on and learn more, because actually I am responsible for my body, and I love the NHS. I mean, it's an amazing system and it's an amazing service. But if I'm able to research and find out what's right for me, rather than use the service and take advice from a doctor that's, you know, probably stressed and hasn't had the time. You know, I mean, they have what, and a few hours of nutritional training, you know, a doctor. I mean, they have nutritionists on hand now, but there are so many other people that need that. I can, you know, buy a book, I can ask for advice, I can, you know, discover so much more. And that's what
I mean, and it is also that thing about educating ourselves on our health and well-being is crucial, I think, these days. And it isn't even about precious resources. I mean, I think the health models that we have are often the wrong way up anyway. So there's a lot of illnesses, and doctors will tell you this, and I'm not saying anything new, but prevention of illness is better than waiting till you're on the diabetic ward and having your leg chopped off. It's a lot better. You know,
my goal is to avoid the, you know, operating theatre now. You know, and every you know, I always say to people, every decade that you're working on yourself, you're saving yourself pain in the next decade.
Without a doubt.
Because it's a 10-year path.
Yeah.
What you do right in your 50s will reflect how you live in your 60s.
And what's interesting for me is, as I'm talking to you, and I guess this informs all of your work, because your background is beauty, then health and well-being, but you seem to flip that, and you've put health and well-being at the core of the beauty. Is that, am I guessing that right?
Yeah, it's true. It's true. So I'm a co-creator of a brand called Calmar Lifestyle and Wellbeing, and we have 4 categories of product, and one is about joy, calm, peace, and love. So it's about that, finding that sense. And we have NLP experts, we have breathing workshops, we go into workplaces and do wellness in the workplace. So we're not just a massage product, you know, or a beauty therapy product. We talk about, you know, finding your joy, being happy, being connected. And my co-founder is actually a spiritual writer, so we're very much on enriching people's lives with the use of the product. And the product is a vehicle, and they, you know, they smell divine, and they give, you know, they make your skin look great. I use the products and I love them. And then another thing that I do is I'm an advisor to a brand called Conover Wellness, which is all IV, so that's infusion, so NAD, glutathione, curcumin, peptides, all anti-inflammatory, give your skin glow, make you feel healthy and great, and give you energy. So that's all about vitality. And then I sit on the board of Murdoch Men's Grooming, which is a men's barbershop group that all of the barbers are mental health practitioners, so they're almost on suicide watch. So everything that I'm attached to, Skin and Tonic, which is another brand that I'm a shareholder and sit on the board as a non-executive director. You know, the founder suffered from endometriosis, so she's created a fabulous skincare brand that supports that, and money goes to charity. So my time of being with the big corporates, I still, you know, I'm an operating partner for an investment company, and I find brands that need investing and support, and that's why I'm in Geneva tomorrow. But that is my life. And so all of the brands that I work with today give back or inspire. So they do more than just, you know, make you look good.
Which is great. I mean, and it's also, I think it's really interesting because this stuff is very real in terms of the way that these entrepreneurial spaces now exist in these fields, in the health and well-being fields. And it's really interesting, I think, and it's more and more that this sort of move away from just simply thinking of beauty as something that papers over something to beauty is something that starts inside. If you're beautifully healthy, then the rest of it will naturally flow.
You'll radiate. You'll radiate, you know, that confidence and that assertion. And, you know, let's not forget the mind-gut connection. You know, it's so powerful. And we know now that a lot of, you know, mental health issues come from poor gut health. And so,
there's
you know,
more brain cells in the gut than inside the skull. Crazy.
But you know, wouldn't it be wonderful if more people really talked about it and educated people to really look at that and think about it? But yeah, all the companies I work with focus on vitality, grounding, strengthening, self-confidence, and making a difference to how people feel as well as how they look. And that's been really important to me. And then I'm also on the ambassadors board of Their World, which is a children's charity. because 50% of the children are, in the whole world are uneducated. So, you know that if you educate a child, not only do you change their parents' lives, if they're kind and supportive, but you change the next 3 generations ahead of you. So that's so important to me. And then I'm also working on another project, which I've been on a founding member of, which is the 18 Keys project, which is we've been gifted a house in Wandsworth, and we are trying to create 18 bed sits to get women off the street, because if you're a female living on the street, by the time you're 41, that's end of life. 21 is you're middle-aged.
Yeah.
And that's really, really scary. And, I was very lucky because I had people to support me, but I could have quite easily ran away and ended up as one of those young women. And so for me, this is a growing concern. 18 Keys wants to prove the concept. So hopefully other councils throughout the UK will participate. And so that's what we're trying to do.
So let's do some links for these things. Which ones do you want to know about the links with? And James will send them out. So 18 Keys, does that have a link we can send out?
Yeah. I can get that all to you. 18 Keys. They're on social media.
It is everybody out now.
Yeah. 18 Keys, most definitely. Their World is a great charity. Kalmar Lifestyle and Wellbeing. I can send a discount code to James and also for Skin and Tonic. So if people need to pick a bit of a pick me up, feel good factor, I'm happy to share any of those codes as a gift for having to listen to you and I. That's all right.
We're on about chip butties. What's chip butties got to do with anything?
Yeah,
well, I'll tell you what chip butties got to do with it. Eat them fast. That's all I can say before your bloody sisters and brother get hold of them.
Yeah, they came on to listen to Wellbeing, and there was you and I talking about disco music and going without.
Listen, it's been really lovely to have you on. I mean, it's a genuine pleasure for me. It's also, I mean, it's one of those things. I mean, you said to me on the phone, "Why did you choose me? Why did you want me to come on?" Well, look, we're always looking for people that really challenge the stereotypes, and you do that in spades. It's also this. It is really interesting for me how people come through. And survive and thrive from difficult circumstances. And I'm not suggesting that people who don't survive and thrive, there's something wrong with them. It's just, it's luck of the draw sometimes. And I think it's really sad your brother didn't make it. My dad didn't make it, etc. And there's lots of people who don't make it. I have made it. But I'm really interested in those stories about people that do make it. And then more than that, don't just survive, but then get a feel and want to share that with other people, which is, I think, what you have, is that sense which...
I try every day to inspire one person. If I can inspire one person a day, I feel like I've, made a difference and help as many people along the way.
That's right. And I think that transformation, that capacity to transform life from difficulty to something that's inspiring and helpful is always a really useful story to have out there. And that's why we wanted you on, as well as the fact that you're pretty bloody amazing as well. I mean, sort of
thank you.
A fraction
my mum, I always used to say to my mum, I'm going to work on those counters. And she says, if you think you can, you will. And if you think you can't, you won't. So
I totally agree with that. I totally agree with that. Listen, you stay there. I'm going to say goodbye to everybody. It's been what a great way to start 2023. I'm really sort of happy that you've come on and shared some time with us. Thanks everybody for joining us. We have the CEO of one of the main mental health first aid training charities next week. Can't quite remember his name, but he's an OBE, so he's a very impressive person, sort of like much more impressive than me, but I always get people on this show that are far more impressive than me. So do tune in next week. It'd be lovely to see you all. I'm going to say goodbye for now, and so welcome to 2023. I hope you all have a great year. So bye-bye for now.